So I know it's kind of literal, but Dan Pink's chapter in the book was called Symphony, which was more about the concept of how many things work together as a big picture. But he did, specifically talk about symphonies and how we have to see the big picture. So if anybody wants to jump in first, it's fine, or I'll just start. So I think the first thing that I really picked up on was, just the idea we've been talking about part and whole. We're each our own individual, but somehow we still have to fit into the big picture, whether it's in school, work, art. So we kind of talked about, that before, part and whole. Another thing is, even within that part and whole. Well, I guess the thing I really picked up on was, I take the symphony we just listened to that I made. It was really hard. That is one of the later things that I've made, and it was really hard for me to say, okay, I'm going to pick an instrument, and I'm going to really focus on making that instrument simple. Because normally when I do all the instruments, I want everything to be like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Like there's this tendency for every part to try to be as complex as possible. Because I think that we have this feeling inside that one of us is not enough. And so if you look at that as each of us in the human race, we think that who we are is not enough to play in the symphony of life, if you will call it that. So we're always trying to do so many things to make it feel like it's a symphony. I'll look at this little chart. I haven't really planned to get into all these charts, but I made this chart for something else, but it fits. So if you look at the middle here, the circle is the unified piece, and all the little circles inside are the pieces that make up the whole. I was watching a lecture by this guy the other day, and he was saying, even the word universe, it's unified yet diverse. So it's this one whole thing, but yet it's broken into little pieces of planets and people and ants and systems and dirt and grass. So kind of like stemming off that idea, I think this is what we try to do. We try to, if each one of these is a project, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 7, however many I have them there, each one of these projects within themselves has complexity. So rather than just picking one and saying, okay, I'm going to exhaust all of this thing for its complexity, we say, oh, I need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We try to take on all of them rather than focusing on one, because I think that feeling of multitasking, and there's not anything wrong with multitasking, but that feeling of multitasking makes us feel like we're doing a lot, when really we're not doing anything because we never finish any of them. So I think really trying to tie in the idea that we're all monopolies and masterpieces, and in and of ourselves we're unique enough, that can help us to kind of relax and be like, okay, look, what I'm doing with my life or what I'm doing with my art is good enough, and if we all did our piece, it would form the symphony. So I just know for me in that thing that I made, it was really hard to say, okay, I'm going to go dun 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 dun, because by itself, if you were to take a symphony and mute all of the other tracks, the bass drum is only going to be like, and that's only going to come at the end probably, or the big crash is going to be like. Imagine listening to a symphony in its parts. It is very boring, and it's it's hard to. I think it's hard. I think that's what we feel like. We feel like we're just the only ones going, and sometimes we are, because everybody's not coming in when they're supposed to come in. But I think that's something I learned just by making those tracks. Just being like, okay, look, each instrument in and of itself is unique, has a unique sound, and if I just let it do its part, it's gonna all come together. This guy who I've worked with, who does media education, he teaches people how to be and appear on camera, like what to say, what not to say, how to dress. So he teaches sometimes little words that people use, and one of his pet peeves is he doesn't like when people say very unique. he says, why do we have to say very unique? If something is unique, it's unique. So kind of that idea of why do I think we try to make things very unique when we're already, quote unquote, very unique already. So just on page 127 where he was talking about the idea of relationships. And I think, I don't know if he was talking about how he had to draw a picture, a self-portrait, and the teacher who taught the class was saying that the reason that most things look weird is because people don't pay attention to relationships. They just draw the nose or the mouth or the eyes or the ear. And he said really everything is about proportion and how one thing relates to another. So just that idea of relationships and how things relate to one another, I think is a huge concept that goes beyond just him drawing the picture, but how do we relate to one another even?
I thought that was great. Especially his illustration about how in the drawing class he wanted them to copy a Picasso, just a simple Picasso, and in order to copy it, he said, "Okay, but turn it upside down." Because if you have it right side up, then you're going to make a lot of assumptions about how certain things should look. But if you turn it upside down and change your perspective on it, then you're like, oh, wait, I can just draw this because you don't have you're taking away the unspoken expectations of what things should look like. And it cleared the way for a little more creativity to emerge.
I thought it was interesting what he said about the drawing teacher said that people nowadays don't really draw what they see. They draw sort of symbols. So he was saying when people draw lips, they don't really draw lips anymore. And so Pink was saying how when he used to drive in the car with his parents, there used to be a big sign of lips where he lived. So that picture got ingrained in his brain, so he would just draw those lips whenever he draws a face. Instead of looking at himself in the mirror and drawing his lips, he's just drawing sort of a generic. So I think that ties into a lot of what we're saying too. Instead of, focusing on the specific human being in front of us or who we are, we kind of just generalize everything. So the idea of symphony, I think, is a really good metaphor, especially in creativity. And I know this is something that all of us have to learn how to do. Because some of us are more, I like to work on my own, and some of us are more like, I like to work in groups. So some people have a hard time getting to that alone creating time and just saying, okay, I'm going to push everybody out. That is maybe true for them too with just people in general, not just creating. And then other people who are always alone, they may have a hard time figuring out their part in the whole. So I think the important thing is, when you're alone, you have to, that's your time to go into your cave and find me, find myself and figure out my style and figure out what I do well. And then I think the most difficult part is okay, how do I introduce myself into this symphony without losing myself, but without trying to step out? It's not your time to solo bass, It's time for the violins to solo. And I think that, a lot of that, I think, goes to the other talks we've been talking about, just insecurity. If we're always trying to play the solo in the symphony, it's because we didn't feel like our solo time that came was good enough, or that our solo time that is coming is good enough. But I think if we all had that, the other charts about, filling your mind with God's truth, that you are a masterpiece, you're important, you're special, what you do is just as important as anybody else, that'll just set those emotions at ease. And it'll be more like, man, I can't wait for his solo to come, it's his time to shine. And that's what I felt when I got my solo. Yeah, man, we would encourage one another rather than trying to tear each other down. How come she gets to play the solo? And I think it kind of goes back to that competitive spirit. Even in art and music, we talk about school, how there was competition, but, my daughter's playing solo. What's your daughter doing? It's just that even competition in music, something that's supposed to be collaborative and unifying. So that's one thing I took away from the symphony.
I think it's one of the cool parts of the chapter. I'm learning more and more. A lot of times, even being a part of starting, Unoya, I get a lot of questions from people who were part of this ministry for a long time, and they're like, so what are you doing? I'm like, well, we're ministering to artists and we're serving artists. And they're like, well, what about my grandson? He's an engineer, Seriously, that's that very question. I'm like, well, first of all, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive, But I think even reading this, like one, looking at the way that we can just as a community encourage each other as artists and other people who we encounter. One sort of light we can bring to them is to like encourage this creativity in them, because that's like the way the world is going. Is like, unless you're creative and you can combine ideas and take, the symphony of ideas and just come up with new ways of seeing things, then you're just going to stay in one line and you've really limited yourself, even from a professional standpoint. Mm-hmm. But to be able to offer people a way to tap into their creativity and say, like, I was talking to a girl today at this resource fair, and I said, so are you creative in any way? She said she went to a Baptist church, so she wanted to talk to me about the ministry. And I said, so are you creative in any way? She's like, oh, no. My roommate's a little more creative, but I'm not. And I was like, so what musical instruments do you play? She's like, well, I play flute, and I play violin, and some piano. And I was like, wait, okay. She said, I'm not creative, I'm a science person. I'm like, wait a minute, like, let's open this up. And in the 5-minute conversation, she was like, I guess I am creative. I was like, yeah. You are creative, and now you can go approach science that way too. And she's like, oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Go, be free from that.
I still don't understand that. People say they play 3 instruments and don't see themselves creative. I
think because they think when you say, are you creative, I think what they're hearing is, are you able to create things?
Like write their own music, maybe.
Yeah. And I think that when you once you start putting that label on yourself, people will think more professionally, and so people are like, I'm just an amateur, so I don't want to necessarily put that label on myself, because I think we live in an expert society where you don't want to put it out. I'm a singer. You don't want to put that label on yourself, and then here's your music, and you're like, dude, ain't a singer, you suck. So I think we're hesitant to do that unless we feel confident in our experts.
But we'll never be in a place where anybody can foster that gift in us unless we put it out there and admit it,
Yeah,
I think you're right. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool.
It's how we say it too, because I say I write poetry. Mm-hmm. I could say I'm a writer.
Yeah.
You can say I'm a poet.
I'm a poet. Yeah.
That's good. You should say that one.
I'm a spoken word artist.
Yeah.
I'm a creative person, and my medium is words.
There you go. Hey, I love what he said on, I think it was 136 or 8. He said the guy who was in charge of a company is like, nah, I don't want managers. I want some poets. He's like, they're the original, critical thinkers. I was like, that's what I'm talking about. I was like, I need to call this guy up.
Get a job.
Exactly. The other thing I took from this was, like I said, we'll talk a little more in future sessions about this idea of the masculine versus the feminine, and how we've sort of suppressed the feminine, how I associate that with creativity and other things. And something, Shatone, you were saying at the other meeting about how women usually tend to be more collaborative leaders versus, just like men. Like I was reading this article once, like there was one of those, corn mazes, and they put men and women in there, and the men typically selected a leader who was most competent, and one guy, led the way, whereas the women were all like, no, let's all look at the map. So just this idea of that feminine part of us, we kind of don't use the collaborative spirit.
Who won the maze? You mean men don't use it?
I don't remember. What are you saying?
Do you mean men don't use it? Or do you mean everybody?
Everybody. I think we all have this sort of, like we've been using the yin-yang symbol. I think we all have this yin-yang, part male, part female, one more than other. Obviously, if you're a man, you're more masculine, but you will have elements of femininity. So I think in general, like we don't have that sense of collaborative anything, or if we do, it's usually, everything we do is usually to these extremes. So some people are collaborative, but they always need collaboration. They can never do anything alone. Or some people, they are independent, but they're so independent they never want help. So I think that speaking of symphony, I think we have a harder time with dealing with symphony because we have that insecurity of like, I want my turn to shine. When am I going to shine? So it's really hard for us to sort of put ourselves down on level with everybody else and be like, okay, it's about the group. Like, no, we don't like to hear it's about the group. We want to hear it's about me. And maybe I was talking about this book the last time, this guy's Social Animal. And he was just going through all these studies about how people are actually most happy when they're doing a collaborative thing, when they're in a group. And he said something that was even like people on a relay team in the swim meets, that the people who were the slowest swimmers actually would beat their own best personal time because they felt this sense of purpose, this something bigger than themselves that they, like, oh, if I let myself down, then I also let the team down. So there's just a lot of, I haven't read the book, but it seems like a lot of people are coming up with this idea about collaborative and being in social community and connection is what we're supposed to be doing, what makes us happy. Even though we do have our individuality too, it's something about the parts making the whole that makes, the experience that much richer. And speaking of richer experiences, 137 where he's talking about how everything is supposed to be multi-sensory, everything is multimedia. And we all kind of know those things innately. We know when we combine things, for the most part, they tend to get more pleasurable.
And that, is really a definition of what diversity is. Mm-hmm. Diversity of thought, purpose, and gifting. That's the broader definition. So collaboration really is promoting diversity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think people try to get at this collaboration idea nowadays, but it's more for show. Like, oh, we have a diverse campus. Mm-hmm. And it's not really because, oh, this guy can do something I can never do. We need him. We want to have this guy. It's like, oh, all right, government says we got to have you. Get over here.
Token white guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what, though? I'm finding it to be a little different because I think that I tend to, my experience shows me that they're saying, hey, I want you because I need your unique approach to thought or how we can do this, or bring your diverse experience in, not necessarily color or gender, but just that your mindset creates a better whole, and that's what I'm seeing a lot. If you happen to be, a particular race or something, it's like, I think it's going to where it's not going to matter as much as will the unique perspective that you bring. Because because there's a phrase that's starting to be used in business that diversity is good for business. Because and it really does hinge upon creativity and perspective. It's your mind. You know what I mean? That they're looking to add to the whole to make it unique. To come up with unique solutions.
So I just put down here, cross-pollination, two are better than one. You look at our phones. Like, phones aren't even phones anymore. There's like phone, camera, computer, It's like, where is the phone part on here? But that's what people try to market to you, because people know that we have that innate sense to want to have everything integrated in multi-levels of pleasure. So it's like, oh, now you can be on your phone while on the internet, while talking, while surfing the web, while shooting high-definition film. It's like, I just want to make a phone call. But there is that desire in us to have multiple things happening at once. And it goes all the way back to, Genesis, where, Eve took the apple and it was like she saw visual that it was good for food. So I think it's interesting how God has embedded everything, even to an apple. Like, you look at it, your eyes go, wow, that looks good. Then your nose is like, oh, that smells good. And then you taste it, and then you eat it. You feel like there's all these senses happening at once. There's nothing happening in our experience that is just one-dimensional. It's always multifaceted. So it's just the idea of symphony throughout creation. Let me see, 129. Oh yeah, I like what he said. He had if you didn't look in the book, he basically showed a FedEx label or FedEx logo, and he was like, people also taught him to look for unrealized relationships. And so he's like, if you look between the two letters, you notice there's an arrow, like whether that was intentional or not, talking about negative space, something I learned in architecture. But I just took from that, I like this idea that when things come together, there's even unrealized and unpurposeful good things that come out of just collaborating. It's like, oh, we never expected it to happen. That was just a byproduct. So I mean, just keeping that in mind, that when you come together with people, you have intentional things that you want to do, but also you're rewarded with unintentional special things that happen. And I was kind of thinking about, let's see, what else with that. Well, just kind of relating, going back to the broader idea of symphony and some of the stuff we had talked about earlier with the how we're all fruit, so we're all equal, but we're all our own unique fruit. I mean, that's pretty much the body of Christ analogy. We all have a part to play, and we all can do something, and no one part is more important than the other one. And I remember hearing somebody say once about that analogy, I thought it was really good. She was like, if you have the hand, and the hand gets this amazing diamond ring, like the hand gets to wear the ring, the hand can't see it. So like everybody gets to do something that nobody else gets to do. I mean, you think about the feet walk. Without the feet, you won't have the ability to travel and be like, look at my new ring. Every part is playing into the whole experience. So I think I'm going to talk more about that later, just, the oppression of the collaborative, feminine kind of spirit, but I think we definitely don't engage with that as much. We like the independent self, and it's a lot harder to lose yourself. I think that's the thing that scares us the most. We feel like, if I give in to this group, then what's going to happen to me? It's like you're not dissolving and losing yourself. You're playing your part. Like, you're playing your part still, like no one else can play. And on top of that, you're benefiting from this amazing, massive experience that you wouldn't get to experience otherwise. The other thing, so the last thing I had, but I guess for me this is, two more things. I like what he said, even finding the relationships. This was on 136, finding relationships between relationships. So over here you have the medical field, and over here you have the art. So within each field, in and of itself, there's already connections and relationships you have to make. But then kind of like bringing this whole big piece over here, it's like, okay, how does art and medicine? So I just think that's really fascinating. The whole idea of what he's talking about, crossing over fields. And he said, if you're a creative person, you're probably doing this stuff anyway. And I think it's true. Like when I write poetry, I'm already thinking about now how would a scientist write this, or how would a doctor write this? So I think creative people have already got this. They're not like, oh wow, I never thought about making connections. I think maybe that's meant more for the people who read this and have never gotten it. But I was really happy to hear what he said on, I think it's 134, the metaphor maker. When I read that, I was happy because, I'm a poet, hip-hop artist, and in hip-hop, if you don't have metaphors, you're just dead. You might as well not even be in hip-hop, because that's what it's all based upon. All of the freestyle battles, all of the writing of rhymes is always based upon how can you take something and put it in another light and make people's brain flip and be like, oh, look how he flipped that. The other thing I think is important, he might have mentioned this, I can't remember, but I think this is going to be really interesting to see how this connects with the idea of empathy, which I believe is the next chapter. But just think about, like last week, everybody who was here, we wrote a story. And we wrote it from the perspective of, if there was an object that traveled with you throughout the day, what would it say about your day? And so just thinking about that and metaphor, I think it's interesting how metaphors, they just kind of put your brain in a place where, I mean, the best way I can describe it is, when I was in architecture school, everybody would be like, Bernard, what did you like about architecture school, or why did you do it? And my only answer that I could come up with, which everybody laughed at, is because I like building tiny models. And when I thought about that later, after, I was like, why do I like that? And there's just something about, say we were here in the garden and then there was a scale model right here. We'd all be gathered around and we'd be like, oh, look, we're right here. Oh, it's just something that your brain does. It's like, it's not used to seeing things at a smaller scale or a bigger scale. It just makes your brain kind of giggle, chuckle. And that's the only way I can really describe the metaphor. The metaphor, I think, has that same sort of effect where you're just like, oh, I see he's taking poetry and putting it in light of technology. That's really funny. And so I think how that's going to relate to empathy is, people who are artistic like us, we're able to take those metaphors and see, a lens in front of a lens in front of a lens, it's easier for us to now make connections. So when I meet a person and they're like, oh man, I'm really going through this and I'm feeling this way, it's a lot easier for us to adapt because we were like, oh, I know how to see things through other people's lenses. And that's what you have to do with empathy. You have to put yourself in their shoes and see how they see. So I think metaphors are going to be really interesting to see how that definitely connects with empathy. Oh yeah, the other last thing I forgot about, just thinking about symphony. Now, this makes a lot of sense. When you remember when you were younger, they would say, kids who listened to Mozart and Beethoven while playing chess actually did better. Now it makes sense because, your brain is able to do more. Like if your brain, and they say kids who study music actually, do better too in certain subjects. So yeah, like if your brain is sitting there and is listening to the part and the whole and the relationship, oh, here's that violin, okay, and here comes that bass. It's already used to connecting, pieces in the big picture. So I can see why now people taking tests are able to, get the answers because they're able to make more connections and relationships. So that just kind of popped out at me. So if nobody has anything else, we'll move on. All right, so I'm going to show you guys a quick video. This band called Sleeping at Last. I've mentioned this song a couple times or once, and it's going to play in tonight with what we have to talk about. All right, so we'll see how that ties in a minute. But tonight we're going to talk about fear of failure. So the first thing we kind of went through was, we talked a lot about knowing who you are from the inside out, being confident in who you are. So that was more fear of rejection. So now you know who you are from the inside out. So when people come to you, criticize you, whatever, it doesn't affect you because you know who you are. And last week we talked about, I guess you can call it sheer fear or just fear of the unknown. Being in life, not knowing what's going to happen. If you don't believe the person who you're on this adventure with has your best intentions in mind, then it's going to be terror. But if you do believe this person loves you, then it's going to be full of adventure and not terror. So we start here with perfect love, cast out fear. And this is one of those concepts that it's like you can't really explain it one part away from the other part. They just kind of work together, and if you don't explain it all as a whole, then it doesn't make sense. So for instance, perfect love. If I told you that I perfectly love you, all of my intentions, my thoughts, actions, everything towards you is perfect love. Not just love, perfect love. It's impossible for you to have fear. It just doesn't even make sense. If you believe that everything that I do towards you is always for your best intention, always for your good, always for your pleasure, always to give you the best life possible, how could you ever fear me? It's just impossible. The two cannot coexist. So on the other hand, if you have fear, the only reason you have fear is because you obviously don't believe that I perfectly love you. See, it's just one of those things where you just have to have both of them to explain it. So we're going to talk about perfect love. I mean, that applies to rejection and fear of the unknown, but also the fear of failure. So the first thing I have over here is performance and performance. And I think it's just interesting, play on words. A lot of us as people, we try to perform to get our worth, whether it be school or with spouse or with girlfriend or with job. But then as artists, we also have performance. So we have both levels. We can judge ourselves on just our performance in life, but also our actual performance on stage. So that was just a fun wordplay thing. So the main thing we're going to kind of stem from is this idea of how currently most of what we do is the mentality of you perform and then you get love. Versus the opposite is where love is free and given, period, and then out of that comes any type of performance. And you can see how this applies in school, work, and in art. So I think the first thing I kind of delve into is, I think most people see this, and first off, we're already fighting that mindset of performance for love. But then they think, oh, well, you can't just love people. They have to do a good thing. We can't just give people, free praise. So we kind of have to get into the subtleties of that. So on this chart, we're talking about love. We'll start off with just love and respect. So we've talked about this before. Talking with my friend, and she was talking with a friend, and they used the phrase, love is given, but respect is earned. And I like that because we're not talking about being loved because of what you do, though. So if you look here, the problem now is people's identity and performance are tied up into one. They're intertwined. When really, what you do, your performance, is completely separate from who you are as a valuable human being, masterpiece we've been talking about. So we have to be careful with this idea, because I think people, they see the performance and the love when really they're thinking performance and praise, or performance and adulation and adoration. So, because I think it's very important to be loved for who you are, period. But at the same time, you should do good work. Like, the two aren't exclusive. Just because God loves you, you don't say, oh, well, God loves me, so I'm going to do horrible work. It's so amazing how stuff comes through. I don't even know why Evan dropped this magazine, Relevant, on the table today, and I happened to read this article talk about cheaters never win, and it was based on this study of people who believe that a God who is mean towards them are less likely to cheat because they fear the repercussions. People who think their God is gracious towards them are more likely to cheat because they think, oh, well, he's going to forgive me anyway. He's gracious and forgiving. So that kind of mentality, you could take that love that God gives you as one or two ways. You could say, oh, he loves me anyway, so I'm just going to do whatever and not care. Or should that love be the love that says, wow, he really loves me that much. I actually want to do my best because he loves me. Like, I want to reciprocate that love to him. And I think once you were to experience that kind of love, your immediate thought would not be, how can I do my least possible best work? I think you would realize how much that sets you free. Like, okay, so when God loves me, he loves me just because. So I can try anything and do anything. So there's no fear. So then I think you'd be much more willing to do things versus not do things. So the way I kind of explain this is what I call acceptance level 1 and acceptance level 2. So acceptance level 1 is, I see you on the street, a car is about to hit you. I love you enough that I will save your life. That's just the general human basic level of loving someone. Acceptance level 2 is much more about the respect, the earning part. So we all have the right to create. If you want to go home on the weekend and mess around on software and make movies and make music, yeah, we all have that basic desire to create. And if you want to just do it for fun and get that, out of your system, good, you're in acceptance level 1. But the moment you cross this vertical threshold and you're like, I want to be in movies, I want to be on a big stage, I want to be in galleries, then you have to do hard work. Like, we're not just going to accept you just because. Like, you have to do something to be accepted.
But what if you're just really nice?
Well, you can start your own group, the nice people group. But I mean, in one sense, for the people who are experiencing your art, like, they deserve better. They don't deserve you just giving them some half-concocted painting. I mean, if I'm paying money for money that I worked hard for in my job, and then I'm paying to come see you, you need to be good. So you can take the word acceptance there to be more like the way you get accepted to college. They don't just let anybody in. Like, you have to apply and fill out papers and show that you've done something worthy of being there. And I like how you can take even the words love and respect and use them differently. So, like, if I'm sitting at a table having a conversation with people, I love you enough to have a conversation with you and not cut you off. I respect you enough to say, oh, that's great, you have an opinion and you're allowed to speak it. That's a whole nother story over here where I find my favorite artist and like, oh man, I love your work. I love your paintings, and I have so much respect for you. Like, those two words, it's amazing how they can be the same words but have completely different meanings. Or you can think about it in the difference of someone loving you, someone liking you. So if I say a person off the street, I love them, like I love them enough save them from getting hit from truck. That doesn't mean I have to hang out with them afterwards, you know. I mean, just honestly, I love you, but it doesn't mean I necessarily like you. And it doesn't mean I dislike you, but I'm just not drawn to you. But somebody who...
Yes, I think love is especially not based off of emotion, whereas like is based off of emotion. Like love, that's something that should just be pure. It's something that should be given for free and no obligations or anything. But like is like if you had like a child, let's say for an example, they're like just completely bad, whatever. And you can say to that child, I love you because you're my child. You came from my body, but because of your attitude, I don't like you.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah. As I say, Cosby Show references. I remember there was this one Cosby Show where Claire Huxtable was taking Denise off to college, and she just said something like, I'm going to miss you. And not just because you're my daughter and I love you, but because I like you. So I thought that was interesting that she, conveyed that way.
Well, one's conditional and one's unconditional.
Yeah.
There's another way of saying it. Yeah. Liking is conditional on some things. Loving, ideally, isn't.
Yeah.
I think love is like desiring someone's good and acting on that, whereas like is like having an affinity for someone.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I would define it.
And the other trouble is we have so many definitions of the word love. Yeah. We have to define. So
we've only got one word for it, as opposed to other languages that have many words for it.
Yeah, we have one word and a million meanings.
Mm-hmm. Make more sense.
But the ultimate love that we're dealing with is, love is patient, love is kind. Mm-hmm. Yeah, God is love, long suffering. So we're going where all you guys are going. So yeah, love is unconditional. And like you guys said, once you make love, I think people throw this term around too much. They just say, oh yeah, unconditional love. And they don't really think about what that means without even looking at the words, which is unconditional, meaning there is no conditions. So as soon as you put a price tag on it or an action on it, it immediately is no longer unconditional. It is now conditional. So I listen to Joseph Prince a lot. I like what he says because it really causes you to see the nuances that we miss. So he's like, okay, say we have unconditional love, right? Most of us get this one, like, oh yeah, I'm so good, I deserve God's love. Like we know, oh yeah, that's pride, you shouldn't say that, blah, 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 that's wrong. But then the other one that usually trips us up is, oh yeah, God could love me, I'm too bad. Yeah, I'm too... Like we think that's okay because it's some type of humility that we're showing. And he was like, it's not about how good you are, and it's not how bad a sinner you are. It's about the one who has unconditional love. So you can never say, oh, God, I deserve your love because I'm good. Or you can never say, I don't deserve your love because I'm bad. He's like, you're pretty much basing who God is on who you are. You're starting, the basis of the universe is built upon us. So we're pretty much making ourselves God when we say, oh yeah, he could never do that. He's like, actually, I do that because it's who I am. So he's completely detached from any action that we could ever do or not do. He's like, I love because I am love. So that's the first part. So in 3, I put, once love is no longer free, once the giver of the love has been told that his love is earned because of something you did, you're pretty much saying that the person who loves you is not making a choice. They have loved you because of what you've done. Like they had no say in it. You were good, so I loved you. Or you were bad, so I chose not to love you. It's like, no, I love because I am loved. The other thing is, right along with that, like once you turn the object of affection into a duty, like I love you because you did something right because I had no choice. We're pretty much turned into a transaction. Okay, God, I did good stuff today. You want to love me? Like it's no longer a relationship. It's a business relationship. So once you turn love into something where people are doing it to get it, by default, you're also saying the person receiving the love is now a duty or an obligation, not because the person said, I love you because I'm completely detached from any action you could do, and I just love you just because. So now, do you want to be? Who wants to be loved out of obligation? Who wants to be loved out of duty? No one. Everybody wants to be loved because they want the lover to love them because, unconditional, just because. To kind of relate that, there's this interesting story in Drive that Dan Pink, he brings up Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer. And he says, there's a scene in Tom Sawyer when Tom's aunt makes him paint the fence. And so his friend comes by and is like, you got to paint the fence. And Tom's just like, I don't know what you're talking about. This is the best stuff I've ever done in my life. And then all of a sudden the guy's like, wait a minute. No, let me paint the fence. Like, Tom's like, nah, man, get off me. Nah, I'm painting the fence. Get back. Nah. And he's like, nah, man, come on, I want to paint. He's like, okay, give me your apple. You can paint the fence. It's like, all right, deal. So next thing you know, he's got like all the boys around the block painting the fence because he's tricked them into thinking that it's fun. So he said, Mark Twain said, Tom came to the conclusion that what the body is obliged to do is called work. But what the body is not obliged to do is called play. So whenever there's an obligation to something, by definition, you usually don't want to do it because you have to do it. Whereas there's a time when there's stuff that's given to you as a choice, the whole point that it's fun and desirable is because you get to choose. So if we go back into our whole, gods who choose versus robots thing, pretty much when you have this decision or decision made for you, it's not a joy because you have eliminated your innate desire for free will. So I put, lack of love, freedom, choice, desire can turn pleasurable things into obligation, work, task. Another thing he says in Drive is like there's these guys who get up early on Saturday morning and they pay all this money to drive these 4-horse drawn carriages. He said, but if you were to take those same guys and say, okay, next Saturdays, if you guys get up early, I'll pay you lots of money. He said, immediately you have turned something that was play into work because now you put a condition upon it. If you get up, then you get paid. Whereas before, they were actually paying. It seems like it seems counterintuitive. We would think, oh yeah, somebody's going to pay me to do this? Yeah, of course. He's like, no, these people are actually paying to do something because they enjoyed it. Whereas people who are getting paid to do something actually don't enjoy it because now it's an obligation. It's no longer free. It's no longer a choice. It's if you do this, then you get this versus I do this because I want to do this. Something else with that, I think. But yeah, I mean, if you just tie that into the idea of unconditional love. There's the person doing a job or painting because they like to do it. There's no conditions. They're not. I talked earlier about the artists who submitted their work to a jury for commissioned works and non-commissioned works, and the jury always was able to pick out the non-commissioned because they were like, there's just something extra creative about these, even though they're both great. And it was just because the artist said, yeah, when I don't have to feel like I'm working for somebody, I just feel free. Like I'm not painting because there's this guy hanging over my shoulder. I'm painting because I want to paint. So I think it's interesting here in culture too, how you could have, wife, children, work, and all these things are meant to be fun. They're meant to be joys. They're meant to be exciting things. But people come all the way over here to the other side of the scale, and they turn them into obligations. It goes from, I get to work. I have a family. I get to take care of these. This is my responsibility to, I got to feed my kids. Yeah, got to go to work. Yep, no, I can't. Got to take care of my wife. Like they turn things into prison and obligations rather than saying, oh wow, this is a gift given to me that I have the pleasure and responsibility of taking care of. So the last one, I came up with this thing a little while ago, how God's sort of self-sufficiency is similar to art. So God here, all his wants are completely detached from his needs. And in his not needing us, it allows him to completely want us. So if you think about art, the main reason we like art is because it's quote-unquote useless. You don't have to do it. You won't die physically if you don't paint a painting or listen to music. And so that choice to do it or not do it is what makes it pleasurable. And in that way, we can see that's how God looks at us. He's like, I didn't have to make you all. I wasn't obligated. There was no pressure from someone above me saying create people and then, interact with them. His self-sufficiency, showing how much he doesn't need us, should make you be like, wow, he doesn't need us, but he chose to create us. Like that kind of mentality is, I think, how we should look at ourselves, seeing ourselves as God's artwork. Like I said, that word poema means we're God's poem. So I think, when you first hear that, you're like, we don't like it. It's like, oh, God doesn't need me. But then you realize how amazing that is, because he doesn't need me, but he did make me. And if you think about it, it's actually even more of a hassle to make art than it is to not make art. Because if you make a painting, then you're like, okay, now I got this thing, now I got to hang it up. Because I can't, if you care about it, you can't just leave it on the ground. You have to, it's a lot more hassle because now you have to attend to this thing. Whereas before, you could just be like, I'm not making anything and I'm just going to stick to myself. So, I know there's a lot going on there. I went over this a bunch of times and I still feel like in my head, I'm like this. I don't know, if you guys are confused, let me know. I'm not offended, as I said. But there's a bunch of themes that I was trying to put together there.
This is good.
Let's see. So if we jump back to this chart. So current mindset, you perform, you get love. Incorrect. You perform, you get praise, you get respect. That is valid. Yes, you should work hard. It's like the parable of the talents, He came back, he's like, oh, you did work, you didn't do work, give me that. He didn't say I love you any less now. He didn't say I love you any less. Their personal relationship, as far as he's concerned, is still intact. But how he deals with you in matters of respect and money and talent is like, well, I can't. My friend Hope, she was saying that when she's into business and marketing, and she said, when she first started the business, she wasn't as successful, and her partner in business said, I love you. You come to my house, hang out, great. We're friends. I see you on the street. I love to see you. Our relationship is great. But when it comes to business, you don't really work the way that I work. And I'm not going to just invite you to the secret, business meeting circles where we give away this advice on how to grow your business until I see you working harder. So there's a big difference between relationship and respect and praise and those kind of things. So I think that's, for some people, they have a hard time because, I know Evan always brings it up. The culture is oh, we just love you, no matter what. It's no, you got to do something. But I think people get afraid because they fear this. As soon as they hear that, oh, I got to do something to get my love from my parents. And I think that's the scariest thing for most people because we're always looking for that approval. And when we finally find a little system that works, I think that's why we try to control God too. It's oh, okay. I see what happens. I bring home paper with the letter A on it in red. Parents smile. I'm going to keep doing that. And so then they're always living in fear of either losing that smile or the other kids, they fear the fear reaction. Oh, I didn't bring home A. They're going to, yell at me. So I think the more we attach performance and love, the more detrimental it is because you then associate it with you personally. So when we're talking about failure, people fail a test and what they take away is I am a failure versus no, wait. My dad said he'd love me no matter if I got an F or an A. So he loves me. I'm great. I just happen to not do well on this. That's okay. My dad loves me. Let me go work. Just separating those two will, bring the freedom. So that applies in school, work, art, everything. So I think especially for artists, if you take the example of a musician and you release an album and it flops, the first thing you think is, I'm a huge failure. It's well, your album, to a degree, yes, is a part of you. It's personal. You're putting out your heart and your soul and all that good stuff. But you did not fail. You failed a project. You are not a failure. Your CD didn't do so well. If you want to go to the ultimate thing we've been talking about, obviously, if our our identity is wrapped up in what we do anyway, we've already got the wrong picture, because our identity is supposed to be wrapped up in God, because He never changes. So if He never changes, then our identity never changes, so we can fail 100 times, and it's just like, oh yeah, I just do that kind of stuff. Like, you can put out albums like you do it on the weekend. Yeah, just release albums. That's what I do.
It's
I
funny.
just dropped the LP.
They say in like entrepreneurship classes I've had, most entrepreneurs fail a lot.
Yeah.
Like, they just run a business and they get it started until it fails, and they're like, all right, let's go. Let's do another one. Let's do something that works. And you fail, and failure isn't seen because their identity isn't wrapped up in it, because they've been told it's okay to fail, because every other entrepreneur does. So they're like, okay, in my field it's expected that failure is going to happen. All right. So this is a natural part of how I learn and grow and develop along the way, because it's rare that somebody's first business venture is just this great success that's amazing.
Not Facebook.
Yeah.
I think that in society we're taught how to do well. We're not taught how to make mistakes well, or how to fail, or like how to do that gracefully and.
We're trying to avoid it.
Yeah, we're just like, I think sometimes your parents say it, but nobody's like, it's okay if you do this. If there's all kind of repercussions for failure or mistakes. So we don't even know how to functionally admit our mistakes, whether it's in relationship or whether it's work or whatever. Like, when somebody makes a mistake, it's usually a big ordeal, and they have to come to some.
Well, people lie about it.
Yeah.
We covered up. You cook the books, so your business looks like it's doing better. You lie about, how well a relationship is going.
I just don't think we don't have the, especially in American society, I think, because everything's based on our performance, how we want bigger, faster, we want to be the best, sort of this expert mentality. If we even had a vocabulary to, because I think that the more you fail, the more you learn, the more you're probably going to do better, because you learn from that as opposed to making you sort of know everything. And that sort of, it's humbling too, and we also do not like to be humble.
Yeah. Like my little brother said that same thing. He's just graduated high school, and he said the frustrating thing is you get an X on your test, and that's the end.
Yeah.
There's no sense of, you got an X, but let's see why you got this X. There's no growing. It's just you failed. It's like, judgment, stamp. And it's like, some we're going to get to, tonight is like the idea of the only failure is to stop trying, and that's what happens when you put that red X and you tell kids they fail. Like, you pretty much ended the sentence. Like we talked about last week, there's statements, periods, and then there's the question mark, which is always open. So in the failure is this kind of negative cycle of that. They just always put the period. You're done, you're a failure. Something else you said. There's this quote I'm reading in this book. There's this quote that I read in this book that I have to finish called Creativity. And it's Madame Langle. She's an author, and she says, the human being is the only creature that can fail. If an ant fails, it dies. It's over. It's like, that's the beauty of being a human being, is we have the ability to learn from our mistakes and then try again.
A mortal mistake.
Yeah.
Most of the time.
And something I was thinking about while I was preparing all this, I just thought, I don't know. Maybe I just never thought about it. Maybe I just don't care. But I've never really sat down and really thought about the concept of failure and why it's so scary to people. And I started thinking about the positive side of it. Is like, well, perhaps that should make us see, like, wow, we have this ultimate urge to always be successful. And then I thought, well, that must be how God feels all the time. Like, he doesn't even understand failure. Like, he's just used to doing stuff perfect all the time and always complete. And he put that in us to always be like, yeah, successful all the time. What do you mean failure? I don't know what that is. So I can see how it's just going against our natural desire to always want to win, which is a good thing.
Well, I think we want to rule over things in
Yeah.
opinion, which is what we're supposed to do. And so thought it doesn't sit well with us. It's like failure is like, something happened there.
Yeah,
A fall.
I guess it's like being God himself and experiencing the feeling of failure. Like, that would just be so confusing to him. He'd be like, what? Not, can't, didn't, finished. No. I just think maybe that's ingrained. That spirit is so much in us that when we feel the idea of failure, we just kind of, we get really scared, because it means, how does God fail? How does someone in the image of God fail? So I was just thinking about that.
Yeah.
So loved. That's why I'm glad we listened to that song. I love his chorus where he says, "We are made of love." Mm-hmm. And I think when I first heard that song, I was like, man, that's really powerful. Not just, we love. We are, like our molecules and our atoms and our very core, whatever is the smallest particle, we are designed out of love. So by definition, everything we do should emanate love or be made in love. And so that's why I think love is the foundation, and then performance comes out of that. Because this thing I've been realizing past year in my life is that we all have been, I like the other part in the lyrics, he says, all the blood and all the sweat that we invest to be loved. When it's like, well, Jesus already invested the blood and the sweat, literally, sweat of his brow, blood from his hands. He literally invested that love so we don't have to work for it. I think that's the thing that's so backwards, is that God is like, okay, look, love is free. There it is. Pick it up. That's where it all begins. But we go do the opposite, and we try to earn the thing which he's saying, look, this is where it begins. This is free. This is the starting point. But we do it backwards. We're like, no, I got to work to get this. He's like, no. You abide in love, and then work comes out of that.
I think that goes back to what you said earlier about people often get love and admiration confused, admiration, acceptance, and respect confused with love. Like, I think in general what humans crave is just popularity, adulation, and really it gets kind of hard to kind of like differentiate, because we live in a society that being the top notch is everything, and we have to work towards that. But we often forget about the love part and how it's free and non-painful.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the ironic thing is like we're just creating these middlemen. Love is what we desire the most, but yet we do something else to get the love, which was already given and free. That's the thing I keep trying to put in my head. Every time I find myself trying to do something, I'm like, wait a minute, why am I doing this? Oh, because I want that guy to look at me and be like, yeah, he's really cool. So then I say, okay, well, there's obviously some deficit in me that doesn't feel like I'm loved. So then I need to go back to where the truth is that says I am loved, fill it with that, versus going to this guy who's going to be temporal anyway. So yeah, back to this chart. So if we look on this, so imagine this is you, your soul or whatever. We have this desire for depth, like really rich and depth and longevity, really rich and satisfying, fulfilling life, relationships. So what I think what we try to do is we try to take these little instances. So each one of these little red circles, you add them up, you put them in yourself, and we try to fill that desire for depth. But what happens is, it's like even if you put all those little instances together, there's going to be little air pockets in between. So it's not going to fill. It's the difference between if you were really parched, and I came with an eyedropper and like put one drop at a time in your mouth. Like it'll, you'll get some pleasure, but there's a big difference between taking the full swallow of water down your mouth that really satisfies, from the original source of God, the truth. And I mean, you can equate this to anything. You can equate this to relationships, to food, to drugs, to popularity. And I think the way I kind of describe it is we try to fill in, well, using an example, like reality shows. The idea of being known by somebody is more important than actually having a quality of love. So people get on TV and it's like, oh, all these millions of people love me. Like everybody knows my name. So it feels, it's trying to imitate this. The feeling of being known by a lot of people versus the feeling of being known by one person intimately and deeply and richly and satisfying. So, what were you saying? You were saying something that made me think of that. People love popularity. Yeah, just that idea of, especially in the context of art and creativity, when you go on stage and you got all these millions of people yelling your name, it's like you're adding them up. Oh, that's 1 praise, that's 2 praise, 3 praise, 4 praise, 5. Like you're trying to fill all that up, and it never completely fills this up because it was never meant to be filled up by finite sources. It can only be filled up by the infinite source. So, I mean, in all contexts, creativity, family, jobs, but the popularity one sticks out to me a lot. Just how I see all these reality shows, and people just do dumb stuff on TV to get noticed because they're desperate to be known by someone. And if they can't get the known in the intimate sense of the word, they'll be known in the knowledgeable. Everybody knows my name. It's like, but does somebody know you personally? No. So your popularity thing just made me think of that. Another thing about love being first and then everything being sort of born out of that root, this made me think of that verse now, be rooted and grounded in love. So that just shows you that love is at the beginning and how he was singing about we were made of love. So people think that love is supposed to be gotten for performance. But just to give you an example of how love comes first, even in other contexts. I was watching Joseph Prince, and he was saying, we think that people should behave well and then we love them. And then he told a story about how, Peter and Jesus were together, and Peter was saying, we didn't catch any fish, and Jesus was like, well, go cast your net. And he's like, carpenter, what do you know? I'm a fisherman. I've been out there. Don't tell me how to fish. So he says he goes over there, he catches all these fish, and then Peter says something like, I'm an unworthy man, or I'm an unclean man, like, I can't even look at you. So then he said, which came first, the obedience or the love? He said, we want the people to be obedient, and then we'll love them. He said, no, Jesus demonstrates he loves us, and then the obedience comes. He demonstrated his love even when we weren't paying attention, even while we were sinners. Or that other verse, your kindness leads us to repentance, not you repent and then I'll be kind to you. So I think just that idea of mixing in still the idea of like, yeah, you got to do good in school, kid. Yeah, you got to make good artwork. But first saying, look, no matter what kind of artwork you make, no matter what kind of grades you get in school, I'm going to be right here. It's open. Like, come back. There's no fear. Come to the love, and I'm going to help you do better. I'm not going to scold you because you didn't do better. I love you so much. I want to help you do better. So I think we got to kind of get that mentality that love is the root. And a lot of the theme we've been dealing with, the sort of scientist versus the artist. I think it's harder for the more concrete people to be like, what? Love? We can't be relying on love. We need discipline and rules and concrete results, and we need stuff you can see and whoopings and time. Like, they don't,
You're the one who got the ruler.
I know, it adds to it. But it's like, people don't think that this sort of, spiritual, religious, Jesus, they don't think that's going to work. But it's only because you're blinded to the truth that we're made of love. Like, that's who we are, is love. Mm-hmm. So I know in this age when you're always being pumped with that information of, it's all about the rational, it's all about the clearly concrete, you can let yourself start to believe them, like, oh yeah, I got to do these rules without being like, wait a minute. I think both of those are important, the love and the discipline. They come hand in hand, but it's the discipline flows out of the love. The only reason you're disciplining this person is because you love them. God, he disciplines the people only because he loves. That one verse, he disciplines those he chastens those who he loves. So just to kind of, get all that stuff off our brain that we have to do this other half first. Now we got to get the love, which everything grows out of. We're not just going to love people and, you can just rob me all the time. You can just treat me like there's boundaries. But I think love is like I said, the root. Another example I thought of, when thinking about love is, so say you have this really annoying person, right? And 10 minutes is your span of time to be with this person. So most people, they get in at 3 minutes, and then they're like, all right, I'm done with this person. Now, the difference between love is, love will get to the 3 minutes, and then it'll go a little further. And that person is going to be confused, because he's going to be like, wait a minute, everybody usually leaves at 3 minutes, but this person is still here. And then you go to the 6 minutes. Like, this person didn't just stay to them, he stayed pat. So just by, sheer default alone, love just looks different, and people are like, what? Like, it doesn't make sense, and I think that's part of why God uses it, because our sense is always like, okay, now if I do this, and then we're going to, he's like, no, I'm just going to eradicate that. I'm going to do stuff that doesn't make sense to your sense, and it's going to change you around. So I think that's why love works, because it just looks different than everything else. People are so used to people leaving, so used to treating them a certain way, and you come and you act completely different. It catches their attention. So I think that's one reason. You can kind of equate love and art. Somebody can come and explain something to you very linearly, rationally, and then they can get up here and blow your mind with a poem or with a film. And it just does something in a way to your mind that is unlike, just straightforward knowledge. Last couple things on this chart. This perform to love and love to perform. It's pretty much this same thing here. I'm just kind of using a different context. So I like to think of teenagers, and when they get to high school or the puberty level, and their life changes and they start going through this stuff. So they start trying to get that love again from mostly their peers. So I put here, kids will try anything, as in they will try drugs, peer pressure, hazing, cutting, all these things because they're just trying to get back to love. We're all trying to get back to love. Versus, if kids knew they were loved from the beginning, they would try anything, as in trying to be a pioneer, as going out and taking risks, as reaching for that potential. So just, play on words, and also the importance of how love is the first in that. So next, everyone over there. So now we're going to talk about how failure starts some of these other trends that we see, like a lot of the mediocrity that we see currently in music and music videos. So in this chart I have fear, failure, and copies versus love, success, and original. So I used this example a while ago, but I said, okay, you have Houdini, great magician. He's the original. He took the time to make this character, all the nuances, all the details, the persona, and say he releases a little magic playset for kids. Hey, you can be just like Houdini. So if it's motivated out of fear, you have all these kids across the nation who buy this, and really they're just being copies and imitations. Versus on the love side, you have Houdini who does the exact same thing, and over here you could call it images and reflections. So I think the difference between the two is over here on the love side, it's more about the classic little kid comes out of the closet and he's got a suit that's way too big and he's got a lunchbox, G.I. Joe, and he's like, look, Dad, I'm going to work just like you. And Dad looks at him, he's got his briefcase, the same suit. Oh, that's cute, Johnny. It's more of an adoration, an imitation because he loves his dad versus this side where it's like, oh, Houdini, he did that. Look, people like him. I'm doing that. It's motivated out of the fact that I could never be my own self. Everybody likes him. His way is proven. I'm going with that. It's the same idea last time we talked about the line versus the circle. The line is proven. We know what we're going to get. Maybe think of the version of be imitators of God like little children. And like I said, as we went throughout the course, I put things in more context. So when I said at the beginning, we're lowercase G-O-D gods. So I know some people are probably like, what? Gods? What is... So I think if you look at it from this perspective, it's the difference between Lucifer mentality and the imitating child mentality. This mentality is like, be imitators of God. Like, man, God is amazing. He's, full of power and creativity. I want to be just like that. Versus Lucifer, who's like, yeah, I'm going to be God. I'm going to take over, and I'm going to be God. Like, there's two differences, being God and being like God. And so what I said about that is, when you try to take the fear mentality, like the Lucifer mentality, pretty much what you're saying is, you assume you can assert the authority, likeness of that person without doing the hard work. You're pretty much saying to Houdini, you took all this time to come up with this character, do the magic tricks, practice them, get a logo together, get a persona, get a following, and now I'm just going to come in and be you. And I'm not even going to be you. I'm just going to be a generic, watered-down version of you. So it's not even a flattering. I think this one is flattering. The dad is like, oh, it's cute. My boy wants to be like me. I'm flattered. It makes me think of a modern-day example, movie pirating. You all turn on the movie, you see the FBI warning, do not copy this film. And I think that fits in with this idea of, okay, especially since I'm a filmmaker, Like now that I make films, I know how much work goes into a film. You gotta come up with an idea, you gotta write a script, you gotta rewrite the script, you gotta rewrite the script again. Then you gotta get the script sold to a studio. Then the studio's gotta cast actors. Then they gotta get a sound crew, a video crew, a catering crew. Then you gotta shoot all the movie. Then you gotta edit the movie. Then you gotta re-edit the movie. Then you gotta distribute the movie. So pretty much you got people on the street copying DVDs. They're speaking of copies, they're pretty much assuming that they had a part in that process when really they did nothing. They invested no work, but yet they have the right to just come and take this movie and pass it out and give it to people. It's like, you did not do anything. It's fun. It makes me think of this joke that this comedian was like, he's like, you ever seen those new commercials that tell you about stop DVD pirating? They say, you wouldn't steal a phone, would you? You wouldn't steal a car. He said, I thought to myself, yeah, I wouldn't steal a car. But if my friend said, hey, I got this car, I'll burn you a copy. He said, I might think differently. I'll burn you a copy.
That's good.
So that's just for that. This is a joke for that. So I put here, this mentality out of fear, just because you fear failing and you want to, copy this guy, is not the truth, because it asserts that you could be the person without investing. Most people are afraid to be themselves, so they try and copy verbatim the original magician. So just comparing this picture and this picture, this person just wants to be a mirror, and this person is actually trying to sort of strive and achieve to be like that. I think some of the fears is that people think it's easier to be someone else, but people think it's easier because that person's already set the foundation. Oh, I'll just go plug into that. And they fear that, the person who God made them to be is not good enough. You're a masterpiece, you're a monopoly, so you're pretty much, critiquing the work of God. Like, well, his thing is good. He's like, yeah, but this thing is good too. I made both of y'all. Like, I'm good with everything. Be yourself. I put here, it's funny because I said people don't like this quote unquote nepotism, even though we accept nepotism in other areas. So I think it goes to the unconditional love idea. When God's like, yeah, I love you unconditionally. It's like we want that, but we immediately are like, nah, I gotta work for that. In a similar way, it's like God is like, you are unlike anybody else on this planet that I've made you. And it's like we don't like that freeness for some reason. It's like we feel like we have to work for it. Whereas if somebody else came in here and was like, I'm going to pay you $1,000 a month just because I'm your friend, none of us would argue against that. We would be like, no, I got to earn that. No, you're crazy. This is wrong. This is unfair. But so we'll take stuff from other people, but the person who made us, who's trying to give us free stuff, we're like, no, thank you. Must work for that. Everything is just kind of twisted. We just kind of rotate everything back so that the fits in the right sockets. Right now we just got everything in the wrong sockets, I think. So based off of this fear of failure, people don't take risks and they follow formulas that don't require a lot of time and commitment. First thing on that is, I might mention this again later, but I pick up on all this stuff now, even when I watch infomercials. Like all the things that flash on the screen. No risk, no commitment. It's like that mentality and language is now in our culture. You don't have to take a risk. You can just try stuff and don't even have to see what happens. You can give this back if you don't like it. But just that idea, you see no risk on the screen is like, it's so, I think we're so used to seeing, we're like, oh yeah, no risk. But then I think slowly as it creeps into, somebody sitting at their desk and they're clicking at their computer and they hate their job and they're like, man, maybe I should start a business. No risk. Yeah, no risk. Yeah. All right, so let's see. I just breezed through some of this other stuff, but like I put on here GarageBand and iMovie. If you guys don't know those programs, they come with a Mac. And the nice thing about that is recently, everybody who gets one now, they can make their own movie and they can make their own songs, which I think is really good because we're all that lowercase c creators, so we all have the desire to always make something. So for people like that, I think it's fine. They're just like, oh, I just like to do this stuff fun on the weekend. it's easy, it's quick, and I need that because I don't want it to be frustrating. I just want to get it out of me. I think that's good, for this kind of mentality. But if you're trying to be, like I said, a Denzel Washington, you can't have this expectation of, I'm just going to have the easy bake oven acting class. Like, no, you got to go to acting classes, you got to read books, and you got to study, and you got to get in character, and you got to come home, and you got to be dedicated. But also kind of related to the idea of the nepotism. Well, I'll come back to that. So the last thing I had on here is, I think another reason people fear failure is because they think to themselves, what if I go my whole life and I never succeed? They have this fear of, I tried, I went after stuff, and nothing came of it. My life means nothing. So I'm going to go through some stuff right quick to kind of deal with those thoughts. So last week we talked about the fear of the unknown, and one of the pictures I had was, this box is pretty much the playing field of life that God has set up. And he tells you where the boundaries are. Don't go to these dotted dash lines. That's unsafe. Just stay on the playing field. And I think people have to have in their mentality that the person who set up the playing field is fair. He's not just putting the playing field and then is going to trick you like, see, that didn't work. It was funny. So I think that's the first thing people have to get out of their mind is that, if I try, I'm not going to succeed. And I think we have to put in our mind the picture of a good father who wants their child to succeed. And like I said, we would go for that nepotism in any other place. But as soon as God says, yes, you cannot fail. Like I've embedded success into your life. We're like, no, that's too easy. That's not fair. But we would want that in any other situation. So I think we have to look at the situation as God is the good father who has, he's stacked the cards in your favor. I want you to win. I win. I like, the feeling of winning when I win. I want you guys to feel that feeling too. And if you want to go even deeper, you can say, look, you wouldn't even be here without God. So in one sense, you already had help. The fact that you exist, you already had help. So it's not like you can claim any sort of superhero, like I came here and I'm here. So just take the help. All right?
It has a lot to do with, remember that, you probably have somewhere that chart, you're talking about something else we were talking about. A to B. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of the linear way of thinking. There's this other way of thinking where you might be at A longer, then you might go to B, and then you might go back to A. And I think that our idea of success is that you try and you get to B right away, as opposed to, God says all things work for the good. So even our idea of failure might have been in His plan, from the beginning, that we sort of learn those lessons, and that we're not going straight from here to there. Mm-hmm. There's a journey, which is the point, and not necessarily, the destination. I'm definitely like, okay, A to B, I don't have time for this extraneous, curve, around line. Who has time for that? Just get a point. And I think that, even our idea of success and failure, has something to do with we're always trying to get to the specific destination that we have set out, and not even accounting for, going off here or going off there. Or I think that some great things come out of, I always think about like how people came up with the fact of different things. Like, how did people just start making beer? Like, where did that come from? Yeah. Somebody probably fell into it. Like, I think that's how they started making dark beer. They like burnt their weed or something, and they're like, okay, whatever they used to make beer, they're like, okay, well, let's go with it. And then they really liked it. And so how those things are mistakes, but it's part of the journey that makes something greater.
There's so like penicillin, just somebody left out,
cornflakes.
Yeah, and then like Isaac Newton, apple fell in my, like all these things are so by accident. I think there's a lot of stories like that where it's like, you discovered that by mistake. So I think we have a different view of mistakes. And we have a later lesson which I'm going to talk about that idea of redemption. How, like you're saying, all things work for good. I think the way God looks at everything is like, I use everything. I'm creative. Like, give me that trash. I will make something good of it. Yeah. Like, I don't see mistake. What's a mistake? I don't see mistakes. I just see opportunities. Mm-hmm. So I think that's good. So this is the playing field. You have to first believe that everything is set up perfectly for you. And I like the way Dan Pink said, he calls it Goldilocks tasks. We want to do stuff that's not too hard, but not too easy. Too easy, and we get bored. work too hard and we get fearful. There's somewhere right in the middle that's just right. And I think that's how God has set it up. It's just right. You're going to succeed. I've embedded in your DNA. In one sense, you've already succeeded because you're the only DNA monopoly. So just try. Sort of like what you were just saying, we just want to get stuff done. We don't want to enjoy the process, the journey. I think that's the problem. Like, we have the idea that there's a destination versus what we were talking about last time, there's continual question marks. And so I was reading the creativity book again. And the guy was saying, like, when I set out to do a new experience, he said, I go out with the mentality that nothing might come of this. I might just spend 10 years researching some atom and nothing happens. And, like, people get really afraid of that because they think, what do you mean in 10 years and I get nothing? It's because they're waiting for this three-dimensional, tangible thing that they can hold. And it's like, it's not about the tangible thing, because if you think about all of our life, there's this quote this guy says, the only thing we truly own are memories. So if we had a party here, red cups and food and music, the only thing that's going to last from that is the memory. Those cups are going to go in the trash. The drink that I drank, the nutrients and energy are going to get used. The music's going to be turned off. All that's going to happen is when I looked at you and recorded it on my eyes, the only thing that is lasting is us. So the only thing that we can really enjoy are the intangible things. So that guy who's doing the experiment every week for 10 years, he better just enjoy coming to the office being like, what am I going to discover today? Oh man, I was so close on year 5. I was just so close. Like, that's what it's about, because in the end, when you come to the end of the experiment or the artwork, your artwork is going to burn up. Eventually one day your art will not be on this earth just because it's a physical thing and it's going to disintegrate. So the only thing you really can take from anything is intangible experiences. So that's why like we say, it's the journey, not the destination, as that quote goes. Let's see. Oh yeah, I put here, I said, you are the experience. I think we keep trying to reach out for these outward, like we talk about from the inside out. We keep trying to reach out, oh man, have this. It's like, no, the experience is going on inside. Just like I said, when you go to Hawaii, that experience, there's external Hawaii and blue ocean, but really what's happening on the inside of you is the most real and truest of what's going on. Because if you're there with your family and you don't like your family, Hawaii is not going to be fun. But if you're in your living room and you love your family, it can be just as fun as Hawaii. So the experience that we have is really about what we get from everywhere we go. If we go away trying to get some trophy, it's good to get trophies because they remind you. But if you think about it, the only thing you really want from that trophy is what it means. And if you win an Academy Award, every time you look at it, you're like, I played that. You remember the role that you play. You don't remember that trophy. Yeah, I remember when I got that trophy and it felt good. You think about, man, what got me that trophy? Oh yeah, that one scene when it was just such a perfect line and I felt the emotion and the camera moved in. Like, that's what you're remembering, the emotion, the intangible, the feeling. Here I had, speaking of failure, one of my favorite stories. There's no such thing as failure. Post-it note story. Does everybody know that story? Mm-hmm. Post-it notes, from what I heard the story goes, a guy who worked for 3M company, they make adhesive and other stuff. So he's trying to make a stronger glue. Actually ended up making a weaker glue. Was frustrated, put it on the shelf, was like, all right, I'm out of here. 3 years later, one of his coworkers who was in a choir was sitting, and singing, and he liked to mark his pages in the hymnal, and he got tired of the stuff falling out. He's like, I need some type of adhesive, but it won't rip up the page. But he was like, oh! So he went and got the glue, and they made Post-it notes. Sticky, kind of sticky. Sticky, kind of not sticky. So the thing I always take away from that is, the only failure is to not try, because you never know what's going to happen down the road. You never know what you do now might just be a piece of something that's coming later. Mm-hmm. Or it may be meant for somebody else. Like, you may make something and then you meet somebody along the road and it's like, yeah, I got this thing, it sucks. It's like, I got this thing, wait. And then you trade. It's like, oh, I've been looking for that. I've been looking for this. So I think the only failure is to never do anything. Related to that, I heard a guy preach on this idea of the verse, a righteous man falls 7 times. And he says, why is that a good verse? And he's like, think about it. He's like, in order for the righteous man to fall 7 times, it means he had to get up in between those fallings. But, if you fall once, you're down. You know, the verse said something like, you know, wicked man falls once, it means that guy's not getting up. So, like Evan was saying, you know, the person is prepared to fail. And I think that's what we have to get in our mentality. A lot of the creative people that I've been reading, like, they have this mentality. They're like, yeah, when I sit at my desk with 100 sheets of paper, I know 99 of the ideas are going to be horrible. I just put the wastebasket and get ready. Like, they're preparing for the failure. And I put over here on our little collage, if you want to read it, Evan sent this article on Pixar. And that's what they say. They say, we know we're going to fail. Our goal is just to do it as quick as possible. And then we get it out of the way, and we say, okay, we got that. Great. Now let's move on to the good stuff. I was talking with
It's a great article.
Yeah. I was talking with my friend Kirby. There's this book called Rebel Without a Crew. This guy, Robert Rodriguez. And he says, you know, every filmmaker has 10 bad movies in them. The goal is to get those 10 movies out of the way as quick as possible. Just make them, hurry up. All right, now let's get to the good stuff.
It's the same thing with songwriting. Yeah. You should write 20 bad songs.
And I think that's good from a creative, just practical standpoint. I think most people sit down and are like, okay, here goes my hit. Here we go. All right, hit's not coming. Like they think
there's pressure there.
Yeah. It's pressure, and they think they're going to do it on the first try. And they get fearful. I don't know why. Like, just go in your room where nobody can see you and just write a bunch of songs and never show the bad stuff to anybody. Just do it. I was reading this article in Video Maker magazine, and this kid said he was, you know, apprenticing with a video photographer, and he looked through the guy's portfolio and was like, man, you never take a bad shot. He's like, yeah, I do. I just take out all the bad ones from my portfolio. He's like, it's not right. You know? I don't know why everybody has this feeling. It's like, oh, I can't write a bad song. Everybody has a sense like, I can't write a bad song. It's like, why? Nobody said you had to share that bad song with the world. Just write it in your room. Like, this is garbage. It was a process. I learned something. Now, next one. Or let's see. Yeah, that quote, famous quote, you miss 100% of the shots you never try, that you don't take. I mean, it's true. Yeah, you don't fail, but you also don't succeed. Off of that, I will give you this quote. I love this quote. Got a couple quotes to end on. This is from Theodore Roosevelt. So I just titled it Failure, Critics, Try, Attempts. So he says, it's not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, 7 times falling, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions? Who spends himself in a worthy cause? Who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement? And who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly? So that his place shall never be with those cold, timid souls who neither know victory or defeat. I mean, I think this is such a great quote. Because there's so many people, going back to this chart over here, this observation mentality that I keep talking about. This guy that's what people who critics are. They just observe. They stand on the sideline. Yeah, that was horrible art. But they're not doing anything themselves. They're not putting themselves in the baseball game or the Super Bowl and being a part of the experience to be able to comment on anything. This guy here who's trying to do something is the one, even when he's failing, but he's doing something. So I think that's the best thing to take away from is that there is no failure except for to not try. A few more things and we will be done.
Share one quick thing.
Yeah.
You just reminded me of a conversation I had with my friend Kurt. Mm-hmm. And Kurt and I we work in very opposite ways, but we work really well together. And we work well together because I'm always trying to find a different way to do something. And sometimes they end up just being shortcuts that I want to try, but there's a chance if I do it like that I might come out better. Mm-hmm. And the reality is there's a chance if I try that shortcut, then I might actually fail and cost myself more time or might not be as good in the end. But Kurt will always follow the process. Step by step by step, do it the right way. Don't try the shortcut. Do everything like this. And we were having this conversation about our two mentalities, and I was like, in a lot of ways, because I set myself up, I set up the possibility of failure, I also have the possibility to win. Mm-hmm. You don't have the option for either. If you don't set yourself up with a chance to take a risk and win something because you're scared of failure, you don't have the you're guarding against failure to the point where you never set yourself up with the opportunity to win. Hmm. And because I'm willing to risk failure, I can enter into a situation where I will either fail or win. So I'm free to win, and I'm also free to fail.
At least you're free.
Yeah, there's the freedom in that.
Interesting. Yeah, I never thought about it like that. Yeah, kind of going on like we were saying at the beginning, the choice idea. When obligation, I'm obliged to follow this linear way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think ultimately people that are not afraid to fail are just freer people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like, whatever, I'm all right. I like to die. If I do, that's all right.
And
I'm not scared of anything.
And it goes back to identity. It's like you're not afraid to fail because there's just no personal damaging blow. You're just like, yeah, I messed up. And I had fun, I had fun on the way. I fell from, the trapeze. Yeah. But I got caught by the safety net. And I think that's the thing, is to remember, in this picture that I have of the playing field, God has always got the safety net. I mean, if we really believe that God has the safety net and He's not going to let us die, perfect love, He's not here to kill us, we're going to do anything, in bounds of what He said is safe. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I love this quote. Everybody should memorize this quote, put it on your Facebook, whatever.
You read it, the words are too small.
I already read it, sorry. You have to listen to the MP3 because we're moving on. It basically says, don't be afraid to try because the people who are critics on the outside watching are only observing and they're not really doing anything. Theodore Roosevelt from the Citizenship and Republic speech in Paris.
He didn't want to say here.
What? He don't want to say here.
I don't know.
Neither no victory nor defeat.
Yeah, I like that. Victory nor defeat. You don't take any shots. Yeah, you don't miss, but you also don't make. Yeah. You have made no, options for yourself, as you're saying. I think me and Hung Mom were talking about this. Michael Jordan. Weren't you who told me about that?
I don't know.
We were talking about a Michael Jordan commercial where he was like, I've taken so many shots. They put me in the game in the final because they relied on me. I've missed so many shots.
Basically put out all his failures.
Yeah, it's like we're talking about Michael Jordan. The great. I love Michael Jordan. He stands for greatness.
At the end, he said, "I'm Michael Jordan," but it sounds like he's a really crappy basketball player.
I think that's the point.
He was like, I missed more winning shots than I actually got, and
that's really funny.
And you're just like, what?
I think that's the point, though. He's like, look at how everybody perceives me as great, and this is how many times I've failed. And you think I just go in the game and shoot and make everything? It's like, no, I try. I think that's one thing that adults have lost that they don't do anymore. They don't try. And I will end on a story that deals with that. The last thing. Well, before that, one more thing. I have it written in the wrong order on here. So I was talking about this with Evan and some other people, but I heard a guy say once, it's like, if you look in the book of Revelation, he said the people that it mentions and who will be cast into the lake of fire, one of the first few is the fearful. And I was just like, oh my goodness, I never had read that. And I just thought that was so fascinating that, God is like, look, this is an image of me in the earth. You need to portray me correctly. I am not a punk. I take risks. I do things that require some fear to be involved, quote unquote, whatever that means for him. Mm-hmm. I make a human race of people and say, okay, I'm going to give you all my power. Go, do what you do. That takes guts for you to give your omnipotent power to people who are finite. So this is my new favorite story. And everybody should, one last quote. I wrote it down, so I'm using it. Okay, other great quote from this book, A Return to Love, Marianne Williamson. I like this quote a lot, about light and dark. It says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, but our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. it is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking back so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. I think these two are like two of the greatest quotes I've ever read.
That one was in Aquila Levine.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just go home and find that quote and read it over and over. I just really like it. I like that part where it's like, who am I, to be brilliant? It's like, who are you not? You're made in the image of God. He made you, and he's looking at you like, yeah, reflection is in the mirror. When I look down, I should see myself. I should see a fearless person who's willing to take risks and step out because you were made in my image, which is fearless. And plus, I got you. I'm not going to let you.
I got you.
So, last story I'll end on, favorite story, happened to me maybe about a month ago. I was at Wintergreen. Wow. Doing a video shoot. And so we were filming these kids on this play equipment. So there was 3 brothers. And the littlest, I guess must have been the youngest, but if he wasn't, he was the smallest. The 2 kids, the 2 older brothers, they got on a little bungee thing, they're bouncing. The guy was helping them. He did some flips. So then the little kid, he's like, I want to go the highest, the highest height you can go. And they're like, are you sure? He's like, yeah, I want to go high. So he gets on the little bungee thing, and they throw him. He's like, oh! And you can tell he's a little bit scared, and he's doing backflips. So they lower him a little. He's like, okay, maybe a little lower. But then on the final one, he's like, yeah, I want to go higher. So that was the first one. Then we move over to this rock climbing wall. And they put on this hydraulic harness, so when you fall, it just kind of lets you down easy. So the 2 older brothers go first, and there's difficulty of sides. So one brother's on the easy one, and the front one is the hard one. So the 2 brothers, they try. They can only get so far up the difficult one. So then the little boy, he's like, I want to do the hard one. And his parents were like, no, you just want to do the easy one. Don't you want to have fun? He's like, I want to do the hard one. I want to do the hard one. And they're trying to trick him. They're telling the guy who's doing the wall, like, that's the hard one, right? And he's like, don't do that. I know which one is the hard one. So then they strap him up. He's climbing. And everyone's like, go. And they're like, shh, let him go. So he's climbing and he's trying to get up. And he's trying. He's making his way. And he finally gets a little ways up and he realizes he can't do it. But I just love that kid's spirit because he was like, no, adults, no. I want to do the hard. And he was adamant. I loved his scream. Like, he was screaming. He's like, don't give me the easy one. And it's like, seriously. I mean, I can understand maybe from his parents' viewpoint, they're like, okay, we want you to feel the sense of success. Like the Dan Pink thing, you want the Goldilocks task. But at least let the kid fail on his own and then say, okay, I couldn't do the hard one. Now I know. Now I try. But don't set him up to be like, oh, we'll let you do the easy one and then you'll feel good about yourself. And I love how he didn't quit. Then we went indoors and they had this mechanical bull.
Always a little people.
We went in this mechanical bull. His little brothers got on. They got thrown off. This kid gets on. He's like, I want the fastest speed. I want the fastest speed. He gets on the bull. It's throwing him off. And he's down. He's like, oh, he gets right back on. Let's go again. Throws him off. And the guy who's running the machine is like, I don't know how this kid just keeps getting back on. But a righteous man falls 7 times. I love that kid. I took a picture of my phone.
That's hilarious.
I love that story because I'm like, this is what adults need to get back in their life. That sense of risk in trying and like, I want to try the hard one.
That Du Bois is not going to celebrate mediocrity.
Yes. Yeah. And I hope that he never loses that spirit. And I hope even if his parents try to rein it in, well, his mom said, she's like, I have to watch for him. He has no even healthy fear. So I can understand.
Runs down the street.
I can understand her fear, but I hope she does it in a balanced way where she's like, okay, Johnny, don't run in the street with cars. But yeah, try the mechanical bull that's safe, with pads. So I love this story. I'll end on that. Take that spirit with you.
All right.